The story of the village of the dead. It was a warm summer night when a group of friends decided to take a road trip to a nearby village that had been abandoned for years. The village had been hit by an epidemic, and all the villagers had died. The place was now a ghost town, and it had become a popular spot for urban explorers and thrill seekers. The group of friends, consisting of Emma, Jack, Sarah, and Tom, arrived at the village in the middle of the night. They parked their car and started walking around the village. It was eerie, to say the least. The houses were empty, the streets were silent, and the only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the distant hoots of an owl. As they were exploring the village, they stumbled upon a cemetery. It was a small, overgrown cemetery, with old headstones and crumbling walls. Emma, who was interested in history, started reading the inscriptions on the headstones. Suddenly, she let out a gasp. "Guys, look at this," she said, pointing at a headstone. "This person died in 1920, but look at the date of birth, 1880. That's only 40 years old. Something's not right here." The group started to look more closely at the headstones, and they noticed a pattern. Most of the people buried there had died in their 30s or 40s, and many of them had died on the same day. It was as if the epidemic had struck them all at once. As they were leaving the cemetery, they heard a strange noise. It was coming from one of the houses. They cautiously approached the house, and Jack tried the door. It was unlocked. They entered the house, and what they saw made their blood run cold. The walls were covered in strange symbols, and there were jars filled with strange liquids. They realized that they had stumbled upon the home of a witch doctor. As they were leaving the house, they heard footsteps behind them. They turned around. Into their horror, they saw a group of people walking towards them. The people looked sickly and pale, and their eyes were empty and lifeless. The group ran back to their car, but it wouldn't start. They were trapped in the village. The sickly people were getting closer, and the group started to panic. Suddenly, Sarah had an idea. The witch doctor's house. She shouted, "Maybe there's something that can help us." They ran back to the house, and Sarah started looking through the jars of liquid. She found one that was labeled antidote. Without hesitation, she drank it. The effect was immediate. She felt a surge of energy, and her vision became sharper. She realized that the witch doctor had created an antidote to the epidemic, and that's why he had survived. The rest of the group quickly drank the antidote, and they felt their strength returning. They managed to start the car and drive out of the village. As they were leaving, they looked back and saw the sickly people fading away into the darkness. It was only when they were back on the road that they realized what had happened. The witch doctor had created the epidemic, and he had created the antidote. He had used the epidemic as a cover for his experiments, and he had used the dead bodies of the villagers as test subjects. The group of friends had stumbled upon a dark secret, and they knew that they would never forget the horrors of the village of the dead. Shaken by what they had discovered, the group drove in silence for a while. They couldn't believe that they had stumbled upon such a dark secret. They knew that they had to tell someone about what they had found, but they weren't sure who to turn to. As they were driving, they noticed that their surroundings had changed. The road was now surrounded by dense forest, and there were no signs of civilization in sight. They realized that they had taken a wrong turn somewhere, and they were now lost. They drove for a while longer, hoping to find a sign or a landmark that would help them find their way back to civilization. But as time passed, they realized that they were hopelessly lost. Just as they were about to give up hope, they saw a light in the distance. It was coming from a small cabin in the woods. They decided to approach the cabin and ask for directions. As they knocked on the door, they heard a voice from inside. "Who's there?" it said. "We're lost," Jack replied. "Can you help us?" The door opened, and an old man appeared. He had a long beard and piercing blue eyes. "Come in," he said. "I'll help you." The group entered the cabin, and the old man offered them a seat by the fireplace. They explained their situation to him, and he listened intently. After a while, the old man spoke. "I know where you've been," he said, "and I know what you've seen." The group was taken aback. How did this old man know about the village of I was once a witch doctor? The old man continued, "But I turned away from that life a long time ago. The village of the dead was my doing. I created the epidemic, and I created the antidote." The group couldn't believe what they were hearing. They had stumbled upon the witch doctor himself. "I did it all for science," the witch doctor said. "I wanted to find a cure for a disease that was plaguing the world. But my methods were too extreme, and I realized too late that I had gone too far. The group listened in horror as the witch doctor recounted his experiments. He had used the dead bodies of the villagers as test subjects, and he had created the antidote from their blood. I destroyed the village and fled into the woods, the witch doctor said, but I couldn't escape my guilt. I've lived in this cavern ever since, trying to atone for my sins. The group didn't know what to say. They had discovered the truth behind the village of the dead, but they had also discovered the man behind it all. They thanked the witch doctor for his help and left the cabin. As they drove away, they realized that they had been a part of something bigger than themselves. They had stumbled upon a dark secret, but they had also discovered the truth behind it. They knew that they would never forget the horrors of the village of the dead, but they also knew that they had uncovered a story that needed to be told. The group returned home, still in shock over what they had experienced. They knew that they had to do something to expose the truth about the village of the dead and the witch doctor who had caused it. They decided to make a documentary about their experience. They gathered all the footage they had taken and began editing it together. They also did more research on the village and the witch doctor and uncovered even more shocking information. Their documentary became a sensation, and people around the world were horrified by what they saw. The government launched an investigation into the witch doctor and his experiments, and he was eventually arrested and put on trial. The group received numerous awards for their documentary, and they were hailed as heroes for uncovering the truth. But for them, the experience had been much more personal. They had seen things that no one should ever have to see. They had witnessed the horrors of the village of the dead firsthand, and they had met the man behind it all. They knew that they would never forget what they had experienced, but they also knew that they had made a difference. In the end, the group went their separate ways, but they remained close friends. They all knew that they had been a part of something special, something that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. And as for the village of the dead, it remained abandoned, a ghost town that served as a grim reminder of the horrors that had taken place there. But thanks to the efforts of the group, the truth had been exposed, and justice had been served.